I knew ISB. Okay, so it was clear I knew ISB because I'd come and taught in ISB in the very first year of ISB's existence, 2001. I went there, I started working with a person by the name Keith Mernian. Keith is one of the doyens of that. So I started working with Keith. So my mom got married very young. My mother had me when she was 17 years old.
Maybe this is going to be another story which has been untold so far.
You know, the center of gravity in the world, right, in terms of economic activity, you can see is there's a dramatic shift towards the east. So you can see, I mean, obviously China is a powerhouse, India will be another kind of a powerhouse and so on. There should also be a significant shift in the production of knowledge. We are not like, one of the powerhouse research countries in the world, right? So China is catching up with the US in a lot of things and even surpassing the US in some of those. If you look at Indian institutions, the elite Indian institutions, so the students are completely world class. Okay, they are exactly the same as what you'd get in the top institutions. We are not a democracy here. Okay, so this is not an organization that's a democracy. So we listen to people. I can't say I'm going to take a vote, a popularity vote, and then we're going to do what we need to do. That isn't what it is. It isn't hard if you don't have an ego. You're the most important person in that one, and the spotlight should be on you. Then it's a difficult job.
When we thought of doing Ek Disha Moments, the idea has been to get people who are not wanting to talk about their personalities but are more in silent what they do, but they believe in creating Ek Disha, their own directions for the benefit of the larger God. Today I have the pleasure of having someone who has started himself from Hyderabad, went to London Business School and came back to Hyderabad, and now is someone who's not only contributing to the level of education but also someone who has a lot of calmness around him, a lot of stillness, the way that person leads himself and leads the organization. The organization is one of the most elite across global, and I have the pleasure of having with me Dr. Madan today. And we will ask him today about him more and try and understand what has been his Ek Disha Moments. Thank you so much, sir, for being part of Ek Disha Moments.
Thank you, Vijay.
I would want to understand that you did your engineering in mechanical, and then you went to another degree in personal management. I mean, you don't see this generally. Engineer goes to marketing, not to personal management or finance, right? So I would rather want to understand what was the mindset then.
So it was very simple. My 4 years in engineering college, it was in BITS Pilani. I had an amazing experience, really good. I made great friends who remain my very close friends today. But engineering was not really my cup of tea. It wasn't just that it wasn't of interest to me. I also found it very hard so it was so some parts of the curriculum were easier than other parts of the curriculum, but the engineering part of the curriculum was quite hard for me. I struggled quite a lot during those days. So at that point I was trying to figure out what do I do with my life, and I had a whole lot of ideas what to do. So as anyone
that age,
at that age you have a whole lot of ideas. I'll do this, I'll do that, and so on. So the one thing I was quite clear is that engineering was not what I want to do. I did get a job as a maintenance engineer, in one of in a large conglomerate. So I won't name it. I didn't take up that job. I was an engineer trainee. They took me on and I didn't go, right. But why personal management? So I'd only written CAT. There were only 2 exams I wrote, right? I wrote CAT and I wrote XLRI. And I was thinking at that time, what is the easiest thing to get into? Okay, so I'll just be very direct. So, and then I thought, right, for whatever reason, I thought in XLRA, how many people will want to do personal management? Very few, right? I mean, so I thought that will have lesser competition than the business management degree. So which is the reason I applied. There was nothing, it wasn't inherent interest in this versus the other. So it just happened that was my thought process at that time, right? Turned out later that thought process was not correct. It was equally competitive and so on. But that is what I didn't know that, right? I mean, at that time I didn't know that. But it was a great decision in hindsight, right? Even though for the wrong reasons, but in hindsight it was a great decision because I'd found my niche. I found things that interested me, and a lot of times. You don't know a priori what interests you till you actually begin to do it, right? And then you begin to enjoy it, and then you become good at it, and so that's what happened for me. So that's how I ended up in personal.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people believe in hindsight, and maybe this is going to be another story which has been untold so far. What was the family's reaction? I mean, BITS Pilani, engineer, and then still getting into wilderness.
Yeah, no, my dad is a PhD in physics. Okay, I come from a family of people who are they're all like technical people of various kinds, right? So my grandfather his undergrad degree is mathematics, my father physics, and then a PhD in physics. Uncles, I mean, a lot of different. It's all very technical people, right? Everyone was very technical. So my dad, in particular, was not for it at all. So he said actually what you just said. If you finished, why don't you go and get an MBA in marketing or in finance? What is this personnel and industrial relations?
Yes.
And I explained to him what I thought, and he said, "You're wrong. You're not going to enjoy this. This is going to be really terrible." But to his credit, my dad was always that way, right? So we would talk, we would have an argument, but at the end, he would say, "It's your decision, right? So you ultimately are going to do, and I will support you no matter what."
Oh, wow.
So he was that kind of a dad, right? So
Those days even, right?
he was, yeah. There was never a question of him not financially supporting me, never doing all of that. It was never there. It's just that his point of view was, and an MBA was also a second for him. He wanted me to go on to do an MTech, God forbid, as it is. B was hard enough. So he wanted like MTech. Then all I said, please, just that is completely out. And then I did this. But he was at the end. At the end, when I went for a PhD and when my career was unfolding and so on, the biggest cheerleader for me was my dad. He was very happy, and at one point he told me, he said, I made a mistake in trying to like guide you away from that. I said, no, you didn't. You didn't. Because a mistake is never at the point in time with the information set that you have. You can only give that information. You can't say like 20 years out.
This is going to pan out like
yeah,
this.
it's gonna. How does he didn't know? So, yeah, it was. So family was though my dad was what my dad, my uncles, a lot of everyone, engineers and physicists and so on. They all kept saying, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" But so I have a very strong support structure in my sisters. So for my sisters, and my younger sister was too young at that time. She's 10 years younger than me. There was not a lot that she could talk about. But my older sister was just a year older than me.
So same age.
Same age. So she was very, very, very supportive.
So okay, now I now actually the curiosity is to understand about the family. We spoke about father, the sister, of course, the mother.
Yeah. So my mom got married very young. Okay. My mother had me when she was 17 years old. Okay, and then I have older sister. So imagine, right? So 16. So you can imagine how young my mother was when. And so she was a really young mother, and the way that my older sister and we think about her is that some parts of it is we also grew up together in some sense, we feel that, okay, of course my mom will not agree with that, but that's how we feel. She was more, I mean, if you think about it, she was 27 when she had my younger sister, which is probably the right age to be a mother.
Actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
But she was. So my mom, I'm very close to my mom, right? I'm very, very, very close to my mom. and always have been, so when I was growing up, I have a lot of with people I like a lot, I tease them, I do all of that. With my mom, it's a constant, me teasing her, making fun, having fun with her, and so on. So she's, for someone who was married really young, and there was a age gap between her and my dad. He was already a PhD, and all of that. So she made life work for her, right? So she made it work for her, and she made it work for us. So my mom is tireless in the way that she would do work. Okay, tireless, right? I mean, now she's older, so she's not that way. Very extroverted, made tons of friends. So we grew up in Uti, where my father used to work. My mom was like, in the circle of officers' wives associations and all. She was well known. She used to talk to everybody. She was, she was creative. She was, resilient. She was hardworking. There was never, it wasn't at all the case. My sister and I, we never believed that my mom couldn't do anything. She could do anything, right? If she put her mind to it, she would do it. And she would do it without complaint, without cause, and she'd just do things. So there's a lot of, my mom is a very positive person, incredibly positive, right? So life can throw whatever. She became a diabetic at the age of 32. So it can, those days. So things, that get thrown at her, but she's never lost that kind of positivity that she had in her life. She's always been positive. So those are things that you take away a lot.
I hear people talking about their parents. I don't hear the kind of tone and the respect, of course, but I see when you're talking about your mother, it's a feeling which is of a friend, of a guardian, and of someone who's actually, a hustler in a way, right? Between your parents, which trait of whom you feel that you have inherited?
So positivity from my mom, the sense of. So I'm like quite, there are very few things that rattle me, so I'm quite calm in a lot of things.
I can see that, yeah.
I'm very positive in the way that I always think well of people. I start with the idea that I always have is that I trust people, I trust their intent, all of that, and that comes from my mom. So that positivity comes from my mom. My dad, I think I probably inherited, though I didn't, I couldn't do physics as well as he did. I think I inherited some of his intellect. He's a very bright man, really smart.
Those days, someone who's a physicist has to be.
He was a bright guy. He was a very bright man. So I got some of that, and he also had a very nice sense of humor. My dad, he was always they were always laughing around him and jokes and stuff. He used to find humor in daily life, and even my kids, they know my dad as this very fun grandfather who had a way with words, who could speak very eloquently on a whole bunch of things. So I probably inherited some of that from my dad. So that would be the way that I would look at it. I
Yes.
haven't thought about it in that depth, but I know my attitude towards my life is very much like my mother's.
Always open for, up for it.
Up for it.
Up for it.
Yeah.
What took you to London? London Business School.
So I went for a PhD after XLRI,
And that was which year?
1990 I finished XLRI. 1991 I went to the University of Illinois at Champaign for a
Okay.
PhD.
Okay.
And the reason why and it was a PhD in organizational behavior. So which is why I said that when I look at it going into personnel management, so there are a lot of courses in common in XLRI between the business management and the personnel management, the degree. But the one that was a little bit more shaded was like these organizational behavior courses, and some of them I enjoyed a lot. So one of them, in particular, the instructor gave a lot of academic articles to read in an MBA program that's generally not done. And no, not done. These are proper academic articles, peer reviewed ones, which are quite hard main articles. So many people, I researched. Many people thought this is what is going on here. I, on the other hand, really loved those papers. I thought they were very interesting, and so I spoke to him quite extensively and said, "How does one do this? What does one need to do?" and so on. And that's how I ended up at that point deciding that I'll apply for a PhD. Right. So that was. And the University of Illinois was an excellent program. It's one of the best. At that time, it was one of the best in the world. I went there. I started working with a person by the name Keith Mernion, who's an outstanding scholar. So the behavioral economics is a new, everyone talks about behavioral economics. Before it was behavioral economics, at the time it was the intersection of psychology and economics in 1990. Keith is one of the doyens of that. So I started working with Keith. And then I finished my PhD, but Keith Mernion moved to British Columbia, and I went with him. So I just went with him. So 2 years I was at Illinois, 2 years I was in British Columbia. And once you finish, you apply for academic jobs. The best job that I got was in Hong Kong, at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. It's a brand new university. It's now a very famous university, but at that time it was brand new. It was just 4 years old. But they had a lot of money for research and so on. So I spent 4 years in Hong Kong, and I was looking to move from Hong Kong when London Business School came kind of in these, when you're doing well, a few people are interested in you, right? Yes. And my friend was a professor there. He's actually my friend from Pilani and from XLRI. So now he's an IMD in Switzerland, but he's one of my closest friends. Okay, so he said, would you want to come here, talk and apply and so on. So that I went there in 1999. And that's where I kind of made my career.
22 years.
Yes.
Almost 22 years there, right? Then the home calling. How do you see this? I mean, it's, of course you must be keep on coming and going back, but when you come back with such a gap, the changes in terms of ecosystem, mindsets, infrastructure, everything changes,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
What made you come back, and how did you take this up?
So 22 years in London, but overall 30 years since I'd left India, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, I knew ISB. Okay, so it was clear I knew ISB because I'd come and taught in ISB in the very first year of ISB's existence, 2001, right? I'd come and I taught. And I'd been in touch. I'd been in touch with different people here and so on. So the one thing I was very clear about is that if I was coming back to India, I was only coming to ISB. I was not going to come back anywhere else.
So
that was very
you
clear.
were set.
That I was very, very clear, right? So I always, so and I'm immensely grateful to the people who set up ISB, because it allowed people like me to think about places that I could come back to, which, so if I look, and I have to say this, okay, so I'm just going to come out and say this, is that there was no other place that I could have conceivably I could have come to in India. Okay, so we can talk about other schools, whatever it is, but there was no other place. So I'm really grateful to the founders of ISB, the way they set it up, the way that it progressed over a period of time, and so on, that it created the opportunity for me to come back to India. Now, my main motivation to come back to India was parents. Okay, that was my main motivation, right? And it so happened that ISB allowed me to come back to India in that kind of a fashion. But I also want to add, a second thing is I knew at the time I was coming back, and I continue to know that now, being in the position that I'm in at ISB as a custodian of ISB's immense legacy, it's a huge privilege. It's a huge privilege, and I attempt to do is one of my colleagues she told me in London, she said, when you are in great institutions and you're in leadership in positions in great institutions, your goal is to try to leave the place stronger than what the time when you came in. That's all you need to be able to do, because we don't own this place, right? We've been given guardianship for some time, and then someone else will take over and run it. Now you also asked me, how does it feel to be back in India, right? I mean, see, India has remained it's where I feel super comfortable in a lot of different ways. So it's been my country. I have to say that I've really enjoyed living in London. Okay, I think London is a
Yes, of
wonderful
course.
city.
Yes.
My girls are, they call that home. I also would call London home at this stage. So I would do that. But India has always been, for me, very dear to my to anything that I do. My family is here. Everyone is here. So there are many things that are wonderful in India. Okay, we can catalog a lot of them, right? And there are many things that are not wonderful in India. We can catalog them too. But net, one has to look at it and say, what does it, what what has been my experience since coming back? It's been great, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with the position I'm in. I have to be clear about that, right? And this is an amazing school. People have done fantastically over the years to build it up to what the level that it is. The respect it enjoys in different circles, is immense. The quality of people that they've brought in here regularly is very high. So I think that has made my entry into India, re-entry into India, it made it easier. I don't think that any other place I would have felt this comfortable.
And again, the family which is parents, but the family which is kind of your first family, wife, kids, how did they take this?
So Archana came with me. So it's very clear. She was very clear. She said, "We're not going to have this marriage where I'll be there and you'll be here. I'll come." So, and Archana has always been supported of any of my.
Which is a wow, actually, in
Yeah,
current
yeah.
situation.
No. She's. I mean, she's always been. So Archana has always had my back, right? So see, one of the I can say that see, our career. So when you look at an academic career, there's a lot of uncertainty in the first about 7-8 years of the career, right? So because in Western institutions and in ISB also, you go up. It's an up or out system. So either you get promoted. And then you get tenure, which in the UK is job for life. Actually, there was no retirement age. Okay, so I could have just gone on and on and on and on. So uh, so that 7 years is quite, and many people don't make it. Okay, about a third of the people make it, and then the other 2/3 don't. I was never underconfident during that time, not just because I was doing reasonably well in my profession, but I knew that no matter what, Archana would be supportive, right? So if at the end of it, I'd say, like, we've not made it, we have to go somewhere else, she'd be saying, yeah, sure.
This talks about a lot of, this kind of security is
It's very
something which,
important.
yeah.
No, it's really important, and that has always been my strength, right? I mean, for me, and I look back and I always felt, I mean, my family made me feel safe when I was growing up all the time. And it's not just my parents, my sisters, right? I just, very much my sisters, now my wife. My girls, I mean, now my older girl is 27, my younger girl is 24. They think that I should be doing this. They think that, right? Because when I talk, yeah, when I talk to them, they say, of course, we'd love to see you in London. We'd love to see you a lot more than we are seeing you now. But their point is that you're doing well, you're doing something important, and why would we say don't do it? So that's where they are.
So that gives you a lot of peace to be
Yeah.
able to do what you are doing,
Yeah.
right?
So the only see for me the only thing that kind of slightly bothered me is because I see the London Business School where I made my career. Okay, is very much part of my identity. Deep thing. I have love for that institution. So not being a London Business School person is a little
It's very,
bothersome.
yes,
Is
yes.
there, but in life you can't get too attached to anything, right? So
So yeah, so in a way, it must have been a moment of choice where you would wonder whether I'm going to regret my call
yeah,
or I am going to have a sleep peaceful at night that I made the right call.
sure.
Was it something like this, or you were sure that no, this is going to be?
No, I can't say I was sure. I mean, that I can't say, right? I came with my eyes wide open. I knew what I was getting into, I knew what I was doing. But there's always a part when you're giving up something that you love so much. There's always a part of you that has, and I won't call it regret in any sense. I'm not regretful of the decisions that I made, but there is a certain amount of sadness, right? That is not part of you now, right? So, and that I mean,
And you choose to move on.
you choose to move on,
Yeah.
So and I will forever have affection for that school. Whatever I can do
That
for that
place.
place, I will do. Because it made my career, and it made my career. I had developed a lot of friendships, created a lot of space for me to do what I wanted to do. So I was a great institution, and
Now, so tell me, there are, when you lead an institution like ISB, and in terms of respect, image, slotting, it's globally, not only in India, globally in one of the best. There is always an itch that I can get more popular, or should I remain right in what I have to do? Has that come? That, I mean, it's a conflict, it's an urge, and when you come back to India, it's more than an urge.
sure, sure. So the conflict is, I would put it slightly differently, right? It's not the right thing to do versus becoming popular. It is, do you want to be popular, or do you want to serve the interests of the school to its maximum?
Yes.
Right? That is what you would want to think about.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to be popular in order to serve the school's
Exactly.
interests, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, I have forever resisted being on social media till, forever.
Yes.
Okay. Till people told me, and my own marketing team and our chief marketing officer and the others, they told me, they said, you're not being on LinkedIn and speaking at different points is not helping the school. Okay, so you might think that you're being modest and self effacing, but that is not helping the school.
Yeah.
So we need you to go out there, but you need to find your comfort in what is it that you want to talk about, right? So, and that's what I'm trying to do now. Okay, so I look at it. Maybe the time will tell whether it is going to be useful or successful and so on. But I needed to find that kind of a voice, because my own personality is such that I would rather not be in that,
I know. Yes.
so I just don't want to be there. I just want to do something else. But then when you take on leadership positions, there are certain things that you need to do for that institution, right? And this is one of them is this. But I will never, so, and this, I mean, and it comes easily for me, so it's not a problem, because it's not even, I don't derive utility from being famous. Okay, I don't derive happiness from how many people know me and so on, right? I don't derive. There are other things that I derive happiness from, but not this. So it will never, for me, it is not a conflict, because I will only, in currently whatever I do, I'll be thinking in terms of what is in the interest of the school and how best can I push that interest forward. So
I mean, this is being not only honest, this is also being very sorted in a manner that, yes, I am doing because this is what my job wants me to do,
correct,
right? But this is not me.
yeah, and there is no conflict.
Yeah,
Vijay, that's the
yeah,
thing,
that
right?
is
So
why
there's
you are
no
very sorted, huh?
yeah, there's
So,
no
so you are
conflict
at
from,
peace.
yeah, there's no conflict. I don't have an individual agenda to be popular, right? So
We spoke about that you being on LinkedIn. I think few days back you wrote, 2 days back you wrote something, right? And you quoted a book of Sandler's also, right?
yes,
I want to hear that thought from you right now.
yeah. So, I mean, see, I've been reading recently, so even one of our very, very good Indian authors, Pankaj Mishra, has also written. So, I've been very, very interested in understanding people who have very different preferences to me. Where are those preferences coming from? Why are they doing what they do, and so on. Even in ISB, right? What I attempted to do in ISB is I attempted to create a class where I said we need to have civil dialogue between people who have diametrically opposite views. Okay, because the whole essence of a democracy is that we need to respect what other people's preferences are, whatever they are. I might completely disagree with you, but I have to respect that, right? So that's so. So Sandler's book is an example of, and when you read, it's a very slim volume. Okay, when you read the book, his thing was he was attempting to explain Brexit, Trumpism, and all of that, right? So, and he was saying where he was coming from is to say that one can be very dismissive, right, and say these are ill-informed people who are making some kind of choices. Alternatively, let us try to understand why they're doing what they're doing, why their preferences are the way they are. And he has an interesting thesis. Okay, so and his interesting thesis is that the world goes on banging on about the drum that you can be whatever you want to be. As long as you have merit, you're going to rise up in the hierarchy and so on. So for people right at the bottom of the hierarchy to be told that regularly, time after time after time, what is it telling them? That you're not good enough? That's why you're not rising? So then they'll have to start thinking that maybe, that the system is rigged against them. And then they're going to pick a few things and say maybe globalization is not good, maybe this kind of competition is not good, protectionism is what we need to go, and so on. So I'm simplifying what he's saying, but the point he's looking at is to say what is an explanation for the way that they're choosing to vote right at this point in time. And he hangs his hook on this mythology that currently exists, that as long as in a free economy, as long as you're good, you can always make your money, you can always rise, and so on. And he says that's not something people are willing to believe anymore.
But then it again speaks about being authoritative. I mean, so if I see you as a person, you are not wanting to be authoritative, you want to be firm,
Right.
you want to be doing things which are required, but you are not someone who would want to push people to start believing in something.
Of course.
Right. On the other side, that book also talks about on kind of same lines that why someone is doing, understand that and respect that. How do you lead an organization or an institution where you give so much space to people, and then as a leader, how do you find this?
I mean, so leading organizations like this is very different to leading a state or a country, right? I mean, so obviously the degree of complexity that they have is huge. And so organizations like this, decision making rights are very clear and very well defined, right? So what is my role is very well defined. What is the role of the different parts that within the school about who makes what kind of decision is very well defined. So we are not a democracy here. Okay, so this is not an organization that's a democracy. So we listen to people, but ultimately there are certain decision rights that are vested in me, and as a responsible leader, I have to exercise them. I can't say I'm going to take a vote, a popularity vote, and then we're going to do what we need to do. That isn't what it is. So the board that is the ultimate kind of the claimant of the school in lots of ways, have vested in me and trusted me to exercise whatever discretion that I have in the right manner. So that's what we do. So if you ask people, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of consultation, but ultimately when we make a call and we move on. So that's how you need to run organizations like
Correct.
this, right?
But yeah, now so there must be moments of that what you felt is right, and you know that there is going to be dissent,
Right.
right? And all the dissents are not something which people move on with.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you handle this? Because again, in this kind of institutions, it is important to have people who have their intent in place.
Sure.
How
Sure.
do you handle that?
So the goal is not consensus, right? I mean,
Yeah,
the goal is not
yes,
consensus.
yes.
The goal is for us to make progress on a few, whether it is opening a new program, shutting down some old programs, changing the way that we recruit. I mean, we can think of many kind of decisions that we are going to be doing, changing the curriculum, making it more fit for today's world, and so on. So all of these are changes, and there are always going to be pockets of resistance when you're making these changes, right? So and so what ultimately, I mean, this is no magic here, right? So ultimately, in all of these organizations, is as long as there is a broad consultative process which is taking into consideration what different people are saying, right? Because it's also, while we know the direction that we want to take, ultimately, so we know that we need to move in that place, but the people, there are many other people who will have ideas about what are the barriers that will prevent us from achieving that particular goal. So they'll be advising us. They'll tell us, why don't you do things a little differently? So you want to try and incorporate some of that into the way that, and mitigate some of those risks that are there. And ultimately, people will judge you at the end of it by your intent. So what is your intent? Why are you doing what you're doing? Are you being respectful in your interactions with people when you're consulting with them? And for the most part, they even if it doesn't align with exactly where they think that the world needs to go, they also they understand, that's the way that you win some, you lose some. So it happens. There will be, of course, there will be a small minority of people who will attempt to undermine whatever that kind of, like, that they'll always be. So there are ways in which you deal with those things, right? So that's in any normal organization. But the one thing I'll tell you, Vijay, right? See, I'm a firm believer in this dictum that don't let the best be the enemy of the good. So always we are making, like, so we can't, you can't always have these big bang reforms and then say, I'm here, I want to go there. If you need to take people along, you need to take another step, and so on. And you have to decide, is it better for me to, I think taking 100% of that step is the right call, right? But if I take 80% of that step, then I'll get a vast majority of people with me. It's better than going 100% where I have a small minority of people with me. So that's a call you need to take.
I mean, that is a very deep thought, and I think this is something which is the fine line between a leader and a leader with intellect. A leader generally would want to know, I have chosen, I have decided, this is going to be the way. And what you are talking about is that, yes, I will lead, but I would want maximum of us to be together
Correct.
in the journey.
Correct.
Explaining this to people is not easy.
Yeah, and explaining it to your own allies, right? The people who are there with you, and then will say, I don't understand why you're making this compromise. Why are you doing this, right? So you're not being firm enough, and so on. So yeah, it's not easy. But again, the people who are in this institution, we're very, very fortunate to have a good group of people. Okay, very good group of people. And that group of people, what I've noticed here is that they can have the fight with you internally. Okay, you're sitting in your room, they'll fight with you. But once you come out, you're together. You're there, and you're putting a united front, and you're saying, this is what we're going to do. There's no that, and I'm very fortunate that I have that group of people with me. So and they are unafraid to explain, to say that, you're wrong, or I disagree, and so on. But ultimately, when you're done, when that fight is done and it is resolved in some fashion, when you're coming out with decisions and steps and so on, you're together.
It's just one voice.
Yeah.
Almost 5 years now.
Yes.
What has been, and I'm again taking this question from what we are just talking about, one voice. What change you have seen in 5 years before not only joining, but when you started coming here since 2001? So it's phases, right?
Yeah. So 2001, the who's who of India was here, right? Led by, the vision was articulated very, very clearly by Rajat Gupta. Great man, right? I mean, amazing person. So Rajat, and there were a whole group of people who were there around, so around, and
All the top ones.
all the top people, right? Name the top people, they were here. There was a sense of we can accomplish anything. Okay, that there was that sense. The kind of people that they were also recruiting into the school in various capacities were top, top of the line. But we were a tiny program, right? We had 120 odd students who came into the program. So because they were very ambitious, a lot of quick scaling up, like boom, 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 So the number of students went up. They were trying to recruit people. They were doing all of those things. So anytime an organization grows that rapidly, and this is a school that grew very rapidly. If you go and you try and compare with the IIMs or XLRI or any one of those, for years and years and years and years, they only had 150 students, right? I mean, XLRI, when I went in 1988 is when I went to XLRI. They had 100 students across the two programs, and that's a school that started in 1949, right? So you're talking about a school that even 40 years later was only taking that kind of students,
just independence time.
yeah,
Almost,
so they're taking very few people. This is a school because it was ambitious. So there are a lot of growing pains, right? So when you're moving this rapidly, there are a lot of growing pains, and not everyone that you're bringing in is going to have that kind of aspiration to say, I want to be that, what I started off. So everyone they brought in 2001 had that aspiration. We want to be a global school. We want to be a top 10 school. We want to be this. We want to be that. There'll be much more heterogeneity when you grow from that, about like 25 members of the staff plus faculty to about 500 people. Not all 500 people are going to think in that kind of it's not going to be in, we're all, of course you need in key positions, you need people to be that aspirational and so on. So when I came in 2021, one of the really nice things that the previous dean and the previous leadership had done is that they'd started a few programs, different programs within the school that put the school firmly in the black. Okay, financial resources were like very well aligned with the ambition of the school, So that took some creativity, that took some thinking. So I give a lot of credit to that, to the 5 years preceding my
and especially the times when still, it was just the pre-COVID times, the communication channels were not as open. Yeah.
But they did a fabulous job. So by the time I came, it was quite clear that that we could take the next step up, because now we also had the financial resources to back us up, right? So was there. They had laid the foundation, so we can take off. That was my assessment, right? And which is why we have the ambition that we currently have. But in the absence of that foundation, if they had not laid that down for us, right, we would not have been able to go for this, what we are attempting now, which is we're saying everything that we do now is that we go back to the 2001 goal. What did we want to be? So we want to be a top 10 school in the world.
That was the purpose when it was.
That was an outcome of the excellence that they were talking about. So that those rankings are an outcome, right? But the whole idea is that we want to do things that the way that those top 10 schools do things.
Exactly. Now, in the same context, where do you see that what in India, including ISB, are doing in terms of education, and what globally those top schools are doing or institutions are doing?
Yeah.
That gap, and how do you see that in times to come, the progression for institution like ISB or the Indian ecosystem is going to happen? What do you see the gap and the challenges and the role of ISB?
Yeah. So we'll take ISB, but we can take a lot of other Indian institutions, right? So part of the reason why ISB, the founders, when they were starting off, when they were talking about world class, right? So one of the things that they had observed in India is to say that we don't have as much emphasis on research as we should have. Okay, and we don't have that, right? So you look at, and in every discipline across the different things, you can look at the sciences, engineering, mathematics, so humanities, any of those disciplines. We are not one of the powerhouse research countries in the world, right? So China is catching up with the US in a lot of things, and even surpassing the US in some of those research kind of outputs that they're out there. So while our education system, so teaching is one mission, so that is there, which is a very important mission of any educational institution. Our elite institutions are doing fantastically well on that, right? So the IITs, the IIMs or BITS or any one of those, they're doing very well on that, which is why they were producing people who are anywhere in the world, these people could go and make their careers and they could do whatever they wanted. But in terms of research output from anyone, it was quite disappointing. And it so that is that. So you look at, and today when you're asking me this question, I think that we are still lagging. Okay, in terms of the research output, ISB is a little bit of an outlier in India, So because because that was the DNA, it started with that ambition. Yeah, it's there. But are we in the global, are we in the top 20 research business schools in the world? We are not. Okay, we need to go. That should be our ambition. We need to get there, but we are not, because it's also, there are, it's an expensive proposition becoming a research school and so on. It's a very expensive proposition, but we'll try and we'll get there. So the if you look at Indian institutions, the elite Indian institutions, so the students are completely world class. Okay, they are exactly the same as what you'd get in the top institutions anywhere in the world. Okay, students are world class. I think the teaching is world class. Okay, so again, you'll get people. I think you'll get a very good education in India when you're a student, which is why good students are also coming into these ones. What we've not been very good at is producing the kind of knowledge that is necessary, right? So even now, if you're thinking about I mean, so many changes that are happening in the world, massive changes on account of AI, right? So the massive changes that are coming. What is the intellectual output that is coming from India qualitatively? Where is it that we're looking for ideas about what, how the world is going to change and so on? It's early days still, but it's still, we are focusing on a few outside people, right? And what are they doing and so on. Yeah, I mean, some of it is happening, but it's not at the scale or at the kind of the level of what you're seeing outside. So that, I think, is the big one, which we need to, we need to invest in the production of knowledge. Okay, we really need to. That's something that we need. We, as a society, we need to be doing it. Educational institutions in India need to be doing it, and we shouldn't be satisfied with some. I mean, sometimes we have these explanations. Oh, what are the point of these Western models? They are only useful for the West. No, I mean, it isn't. So a lot of the papers that are getting published in the top journals in the West, right, in management or in social sciences and so on, yes, they're tackling Western problems, right, but there is no reason why we should not be tackling India problems and publishing in those journals, because it's not, what is holding us back is not because, I mean, some of it is true that they're not interested in the Indian context. What is holding us back is, like, the quality of what we are actually we're doing, right? So we can study in Indian problems, but we want to study them with the rigor that can get published in those top journals.
Right now, what we are doing is we are studying and complaining about it rather than talking about the ways to get over.
Correct.
So an ISB 5 years from now and an ISB 10 years from now, or let's say 5 years or 20 years, what is the futuristic look?
So, the center of gravity in the world, right, in terms of economic activity, you can see is there's a dramatic shift towards the east. So you can see, I mean, obviously China is a powerhouse, India will be another kind of a powerhouse, and so on. So alongside this kind of a shift, there should also be a significant shift in the production of knowledge and so on, right? So we should be the ones that are leading that. So I look at and I think about so people will be looking, and trying to understand India, trying to understand Indian businesses, trying to use the knowledge that they develop about India and Indian businesses to maybe to understand Nigeria or to understand Brazil. I don't know, you can think of various other kind of like comparable countries in terms of their developmental trajectory and so on. So where should they be looking for that, right? So when it comes to broadly, when you're thinking about business, when they're thinking about management, I think the one-stop shop should be ISB. So they should be thinking about it, right? So they should look at it and say, I'm thinking of doing this here. Where can I go and get knowledge about that? It should be ISB. That's the way I think that we need to be thinking about it, right? So, and why is that? Because we're studying locally relevant problems, but we are also doing it in a manner that everyone can say, wow, whatever they're producing is very reliable. It's something that is insightful, it is very reliable. So that's what I would see ISB's position as, so that would be one. The second is that I would also say that while we are training people, one is for the Indian context, obviously we are training people, or for the developing world context, but we are also, so people should be looking at us to say that where is it I can go and get talent to power the economy going forward in the future, and we should be among the handful of schools in the world that people are looking at, right? So, and saying, I'm looking at X, Y, and Z, and ISB is in that mix, among that 5 people, among that 10, among the 5 schools, among the 10 schools, that's where ISB should be. And that eventually will be reflected in the rankings, right? Because rankings always follows reputation, and then rankings is a lagging indicator of that, right?
Now, so when we talk about, so this is where you feel that ISB should be, and this is what generally the institution like ISB should be. What are the challenges you see this?
So I think the biggest challenge for universities has always been attracting talent.
Correct. That's a universal challenge now.
So that's the biggest challenge, right? So that is the biggest challenge, and we just have to find. And talent is, the way that the world has developed in a lot of these sectors, talent is hugely expensive. It's very, very, very expensive. So, and we are running. So you think about, like, people will look at our fees and say, these are very high fees, right? But I'll tell you, when it comes to an MBA, the fees that ISB charges is about 1/4 what you would be paying in a top school in the West. When it comes to the EMBA program, I was just looking the other day, it is 1/5 of what they would be global kind of, like, you go to a Wharton, or you go to a Kellogg, or you go to a London Business School, or an INSEAD, what you pay here, you pay like 1/5 of what you pay. So, but the talent itself will not come for 1/5 what they will, in terms of what. So that will be the challenge for us always, right? So will we catch up in terms of our ability to afford that kind of talent? We will definitely, the other things will provide for them, right? Will be the best place for people to develop the ideas, for them to work, and so on. But the economics matters, so one has to look at it in that fashion.
I just want to take a detour and go back to not Dr. Madan, Madan as a person. When you were in your 20s, the way we are talking about that, you wanted to be someone, you were not sure, you were getting into things. You look at the Madan of those days, what changes you see in Madan of today?
So, I'm a little bit more confident now than I was then. I was, I have, so I probably, that would be in one way that would change, so that particular thing would change. So I didn't have a plan, Vijay, so mine is not a linear kind of a life where I knew, because sometimes, so you asked this question, why from mechanical engineering to personal management, and that wasn't a plan, right? That was just where do I think I'll get in, so that was the way that I was thinking then. So later on, when you look and I think about it, if I want to make sense backwards of my life in some sense, right, and it's the same thing that I am now, that I was then, is that there was no job that I was unwilling to do. Okay, so I was so in my first academic job, right, in Hong Kong, when I was leaving Hong Kong, and she was a fantastic head of the department, and Sui, great head of the department. When I was leaving, she was very upset that I was leaving, and she told me, Madan, the thing that I appreciate about you is that I put you on that committee, you'll do it. I put you on something else, you'll do it. There was no question of, I never sat down to say what's in it for me, I just rolled up my sleeves and just did it. Most recently, I saw I saw a video of Obama. He was giving some advice to young people and said, a lot of times young people said, oh, I don't get good enough kind of roles for me to rise in prominence and so on. The idea is actually, so it resonated with me because my very simple thing always used to be that, I didn't care whether it gave prominence, didn't give prominence, whatever it is. It was someone assigned that task to me. I thought it was good, and I just did it, so what, I'll just roll up my sleeves and I did it. And in my research, I'll do whatever it is that I want, right? But other things, and I got a lot of lucky breaks along the way, so people noticed me in various roles. They put me into editorial boards. I became editor. All of that, those things happened. But all of those things happened because it came with an attitude of, I'll just do this, because why not, so why would I not want to do that? So that would be the way that I think that is characteristic of me even today, so there's very, I do need to think about what is my time best used as and so on, but I do roll up my sleeves and do things that are necessary at any one point. But the thing in which that I think I differ from then is that I didn't have a very clear idea at that time about what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were, what I can do, what I could not do, and so on. That happened over a period of time. It came through. So at that time, I didn't realize that my greatest kind of contribution eventually will be um, in terms of helping other people become better, right? So whether it was my PhD students or whether it was so a lot of my papers will be joint papers. A lot of them are with PhD students, right? And if you go read those papers, they are in different domains, but they used to be led by what my PhD student at that time was interested in, right? So and then we would learn together, and then I would guide them along. And I think I was a very decent PhD mentor, right? So so that part. At that time, I didn't know. In my 20s, if you had asked me, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that eventually, if I look back in my life, where I would have achieved something was in helping people become better at what they're doing. But that became a very conscious choice in my late 30s, early 40s. That became a conscious choice.
Even in late 30s?
Yeah, by then I had figured it out. So it became clear to me that. So I would say at that time the penny dropped in my head, saying, okay, I can do this. And I used to feel most effective in a PhD class because that was my profession, right? Writing papers, doing research was my profession. So I used to feel very good in PhD classes with PhD students and so on.
That was your cozy area?
That was an area that, I found a lot of
happiness, satisfaction,
happiness. So when I told you my utility was not about becoming popular, my utility was I derived a lot of utility from the people I worked closely with and seeing them become better.
But now see, this is the contrast. You spoke about writing papers, helping. So you used to work with a close team, few people. And that exactly is the point I wanted to get out from you.
Yeah.
That leading a team or being part of a smaller team, to not only leading, expanding, and carrying forward that institution, which is much larger in size in terms of people, choices, opinions.
Yeah.
What has changed? How have you been able to evolve yourself? Because someone who's into a PhD kind of a mindset, become an administrator leader, carrying the same trait.
Yeah.
Very rare. I have seen this.
So even in LBS, I'd very early in my role as a full professor, I'd become the chair of my group. And then I became the faculty dean, which is a very important role
Yes.
within the school. So I'd become a faculty dean. I served before becoming faculty dean. I used to be the only ex officio faculty member on something called exec committee and so on. So I had all these constantly. I had this. At the time I became the faculty dean in LBS, there was a choice. One of our top journals had offered me the job as the editor. Okay, so I was an editor. So you'll have a main editor, and then you'll have like 3 or 4 people who
you would be
I would be the main
top
person, right?
guy, yeah.
So it was a choice that I needed to make. So because I couldn't do both. I couldn't be. Because being a faculty dean was a full time. Really more than a full time job, and then that. And that, by the way, I always think in my head, what did I do? So what would it have been had I chosen that path? And then that would have been a different path I would have gone down. So so at that by the time that time came along, already I had to carry faculty with me, and take them along with me, and so on. And that was very good training ground, because a lot of while there is a small set of people that you'll trust, you'll have confidence in, for you to get things to go, to move in a particular direction, but you need to take the larger collective with you, right? So you just need to do that. And yeah, that was so I found that was not. See, it isn't hard if you don't have an ego, right? I mean, it isn't hard at all. If you want to be the main, see, if you think of this being in an academic institution, if you think being the dean or being the faculty dean, you're the most important person in that one, and the spotlight should be on you, then it's a difficult job. But if on the other hand you see your role as, I need to shine the spotlight on other people all the time, that's what I need to be doing, it's not a hard job. So that's what you need to do, so you need to be able to take that out of you and say, I need to now shine the spotlight on other people, because this is a people business, right? If you don't have very good people as faculty members, you don't attract very good students as students, you don't have all your top alumni rooting for you, in what you're doing, you
And
can't
you
run
can't do
it.
this when you have ego as a leader.
When
People
you
will
think that
find
it is you, I mean, it's not you. You're in an institution where your job is to tell the rest of the world how great the institution is, and shining the light on that. That's one aspect of the job. And internally, I mean, you also have to use your resources very carefully, right? Because this is people are trusting you with money, people are trusting you with resources. You just have to make sure that you're applying them in the right kind of a fashion, and people recognize that. And so you're saying, how do you take people? So I don't see this. This is a question, Vijay, that others can answer better than I can answer,
So I'm
right?
coming to it
Yeah.
once.
How do you take people along? I mean, you do the best you can, and you keep paying attention all the time to people, and you hope that people are speaking the truth to you at all points in time. See, my belief is that if people around you are only saying nice things to you, then you have a problem.
Something I miss.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is saying, Nindak nire rakhiye. I mean, keep the people with constructive criticism also closer to you and be open to it. Not many people will say this and are able to do this, because, as you said, that the other people. So I have spoken to a few people around in your institution, and I could see that the trust and the comfort they have when they are talking about you, not because you are the top shot, but also because they have seen that if you are doing something, it is in the interest of the larger group. And that is commendable. And I know I'm saying good thing to you, but that is what I hear and I gather, and I get the vibes when I am in this institution. Taking this forward, if you have to write a book today, what is going to be the title of the book?
I actually am thinking very deeply on this.
Oh, fantastic.
I've written a little bit of a
Wow.
outline of it and so on. So early in my career, I was always interested in fairness. If you look, my dissertation was on fairness. The first, I think, 3-4 papers that I published were about fairness. I think the notion of fairness is very central to the way that human beings conduct themselves. So I mean, and there's so much that's been written from psychology, from philosophy, and the very, very, very many different traditions. I think there's a lot that psychologists have written on this topic over a period of time that is worth bringing to the lay audience. Okay, so I want to write a book. So the way I mean, right now the working title of the book is On Fairness. Okay, so on fairness. It's a little pun also on unfairness and so on, because a lot of times, we think about fairness only when we've been treated unfairly, or we've been given an unfair deal and so on. So that is what I want to write on. And starting with, because there's an instinct in us, right? So there's a human instinct towards resisting unfairness, and there might not be a human
Yes.
instinct towards being fair, but
Yes.
there's a human instinct towards
Resisting,
resisting
yes.
unfairness,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, and I'll begin with that. So talk about a bunch of those things, and that's what I want to write on. Okay, so at this point, because that's uh, if there is a second thing that I want to write on, I really want to write on about the topic of trying to understand people who are very different to you. Uh,
So you're going to behavior science again,
yeah,
back
yeah,
to your original love.
absolutely. Because I do feel that, these days we're just, not these days, it's been happening for about 10 years now, maybe even 15 years. We just talk past each other, right? We don't talk to one another. We don't respect what people's choices are. We just don't do that. So some of that idea of pluralism, of like listening to other people, understanding where they're coming from, I think it would be something that I would, if I had a second book in me, then that would be the book that I would want to write.
Wow, amazing. So I wish that I could continue doing this, and I hope that I'll get some more time sooner. I mean, it's been an honor to have you, and I hope that the persona we are talking to get out, it'll help lot of audience at Ek Disha Moments. Thank you so much, Dr. Madan. Thank you. Pleasure.